Okay, welcome back to continuation of lecture 12. We briefly discussed about what are C-values, what is the phenomenon of C-value paradox, what is C-value enigma. C-value is nothing but you look into terms of understanding the genome complexity and in terms of the evolution of eukaryotes from prokaryotes. And initially people were thinking of uh, kind of coding region is important, number of proteins or genes. But later they understand that it's not the coding. The non-coding is really important, as suggested here in the graph. The coding constitute only a less proportion, 1 to 2% of the genome, and non-coding constitutes, and accordingly, the level of regulation also changes. So this slide again gives a comparative study. You can quickly glance and make some 2-mark questions from it if asked a question. In terms of bacteria and archaea, and then eukaryote, genome size comparison, number of genes comparison, even the gene density, considering the small size of the genome in bacteria and archaea, you see that there is a higher density of the genes because the number of genes are also high given the species. Coming on to humans, in terms of higher eukaryotes, there is a complex, highly size in terms of the genome is very huge, and accordingly the protein coding genes are less. So in terms of the density, you expect lower density compared to prokaryotes. In terms of intronic regions, bacteria doesn't have as such. Some archaea has some introns within the genes, but given eukaryote, there is a lot of intronic regions or intergenic regions are there. So accordingly, you look into the comparisons. And according to other non-coding DNA, so there is not much non-coding DNA or junk DNA in the lower phyla, but coming on to eukaryotes, there's specifically large amount of junk DNA is there. We will see what is that junk DNA about. So the vast majority of the human genome is comprised of non-coding DNAs that constitute 1.5% of total sequence. Excuse me, my daughter is here. So historically, the preferred is as junk DNA that constitute non-coding DNA, and they found out that it has several functions, important functions. What in this junk DNA constitute? They are kind of different molecule based on their in terms of the DNA composition, in terms of the location they are dispersed in the genome, in terms of the function. There are different forms of it. They're called satellite DNA, telomers, introns, non-coding RNA genes, and gene regulatory sequences. We will see further what are those, what they will do, and we will look into that. So coming on to one fundamental question, I'm asking that so most of this junk DNA is repetitive. I'm saying that it's repetitive within the given the genome, highly repetitive sequences, saying that given a ATGCs, I can find a lot of ATGCs coming up and again and again and again. There may be some motifs coming and again. There may be stretch of probably 300 base pairs or 3000 base pairs are again repeated in some portion of the genome. So how did I deduce that without, let's say, not looking into the next genome sequencing, not looking into your genome assembly? You simply go back in terms of early 1900s, early 1800s. How did they were able to find that the DNA is repetitive? They did a simple enzyme kinetics, DNA kind of temperature kinetic studies. What they were doing at that time, that given the technology at that time, isolating a genome from a species is easy. You kill the cells, you get the DNA, and you analyze the DNA quality in terms of good quality or not. Then you can use some enzyme kinetic about association or dissociation studies of the genome, because we know the genome is kind of complex ball as a spaghetti. Stones are associated with it. They were studying at that time the melting and re-association of DNA cells. That was very informative in terms of saying that most of the genome is repetitive. What you can do that, given the helical DNA, you go in terms of absorbing different spectra values. You use some temperature. There is 260, 280 spectra absorption on nanometers wavelength here. You take a given helical DNA as terms of genomic DNA, superhelix. It will have lower absorbance. It will have lower value in terms of 260 approximately. Then you take into random coiled DNA, then it will have a little bit more absorption rate here in terms, and then you go into mononucleotides. That means you are breaking the DNA from supercoiled helix into random coils. From the random coils, you go into again break them into mononucleotides. That means you're talking about single stranded DNA here. So coming into single stranded DNA, the absorbance value is a little bit higher given the wavelength of the frequency. So at that time, people were studying all these experiments. They were breaking the genome based on the temperature studies. They were doing a lot of reassociation studies. It's 1984. So one of the concept is fundamental to DNA. They already by that time, 1954, they know that DNA is a double helix. You break, it can reassociate again. So you denature a single stranded DNA, or for example, you say, for example, take a single denatured DNA given a time. It takes a slower rate limiting steps in terms. Slowly it associates, it finds its nucleotide match. Slowly it start associating. This step is slower and rate limiting step. Given this initiation of the step, given the time, given the timeline and a temperature, suitable temperature for association, then you can simply see a faster jippering reaction. It come back to the double stranded DNA given the time and given the association temperature reactions. So you are talking about two single stranded denatured DNA molecules here going through a rate limiting step, going through a double stranded DNA, faster zippering reaction. So let's say you replace this single stranded DNA with complete genome of a given species. So you're taking the genome, making into random coils or in some other way, then you look in terms of the reassociation studies, not single stranded, taking an example of the how whole genomes can associate. They were able to see that when did the genome reassociation studies. So one of the information saying that why we have a repetitive junk. This is the one of the experiment done by Britain and Kone in 1968. They provided the evidence that large amounts of repetitive DNA are there in many genomes. They simply broke the DNA genome into different helices into smaller fragments, and they allowed a reaction, temperature reaction, so that they change the temperature trend so that given a condition of the temperature, the dissociated DNA fragments can associate themselves. So they were able to see that given the log of repetition frequency here, relative quantity of the DNA, they could see that high amount of the DNA, the peaks you're seeing here, were able to reassociate again. That means you don't look at the copy numbers here, forget about that for now. You say genome was broken, again genome was isolated and sheared, denatured, and then they measured the association, reassociation. They were able to see that 70% of the DNA associated in terms of the frequency here, and then 10% of the DNA with this frequency associated again, 20% of variable association, some did not associate, there is kind of zero here. So doing that, they could able to see that if you constitute this, a lot of genome again reassociated itself, almost is close to 90%, suggesting that there is a lot of highly repetitive sequences. When the repetitive sequences, ATGCs in a given location folded, they can associate with another C, G can associate with C, A can associate with V. This association will give a kind of complex formation. That's what they observed in a given genome sequences also. That's why they conclude that there seems to be highly repetitive DNA within a given genome based on the reassociation kinetics. How do you break? How do you combine the DNA? How do you look in terms of the ATGCs? That's the concept of the melting curve of the DNA came. In these experiments, the temperature of a DNA solution is increased while the absorbance is monitored at 260 nanometers, the percentage of absorbance given a temperature rise. The melting point, they observed that given amount of DNA, half of the DNA melted into from double strand to single strand. That comes to a plateau that is called as a TM, melting point or melting temperature of that. And they observed that given a sequence, given a genome that constitute more of AT region or more of GC constituent of the given genome component, or a mix of AT and GCs in the middle here, they found out that temperature varies accordingly based on the genome nucleotide content. AT, it's kind of double bonds. Adenine to A to T, it's 2 hydrogen bonds. G to C is 3 hydrogen bonds. So to break this bond, there is a higher temperature required. It goes around 90s. For this, it goes around 50 or 40 to 50 range based on 2 and a mix of DNA genome having both of them, you can expect a kind of temperature curve in between based on this. So this is one of the things that was very beautifully explained, the concept to analyze the genomes further in terms of nucleotide composition. And you are looking into kind of eukaryotes and prokaryotes. The genome constitute mainly varies in terms of GC content given the genome. Humans have 40% of the GC content. That content varies from prokaryotes, eukaryotes. This is also one of the evolutionary thing you can look into that. Remember that the reassociation told that DNA is largely highly repetitive. So this again a text that explains whatever the melting curve I have explained. So this reassociation is one more concept that also tells in terms of genome organization of eukaryotes. You see that we have a lot of histones, right? The longest stretch of DNA is look into coils and coils. Histones will come up, take a core, again coil the DNA, again coil again. By coiling that, it makes a spaghetti kind of that in the nucleus. How does it look in terms of? This is a in vivo condition. A cell looked in terms of the DNA content. What is the genome inside? They were able to do immunofluorescent in situ hybridization. There's specific technique that we will see in next classes. They did a fish staining of the given genomic content. They were able to see that there is a green fish, that green probe highlight, that is the outer portion of the genome, that called L1 isochore, that is a genome desert they identified. And again, they found that in that core where more of the DNA as a spaghetti is balled, looped and looped and looped again by histone H3 molecules, they are called as genome cores. Mainly, the genome is divided into two regions. One region is not that much of core, not that much of twists and turns, coils, but that is the outer core, genome desert. But there is inner core that is called isochore. There is a lot of density you can see here. Based on the higher density of the knot, you can see that more DNA is knotted here. Outer side, less knots of the DNA. So when you look in terms of euchromatin and heterochromatin, this is the thing. Outer region is heterochromatin, inside region is euchromatin. Euchromatin constitute a lot of the genes that are functional genes in terms of the coding regions. All the genes are present in the euchromatin. That euchromatin is always in the inner core. So to make better understand this, how does it happen given the genome in terms of ATGCs? They really explained very nicely the concept here. You look into the color pattern here. This is nothing but, this is not ATGCs. You are looking for a random alphabets, random words arranged in green and red. You look into this. This is a 3-letter alphabets. There is an asterisk in between. There is bug. There is a bit. There is P. She eats two, and there you can the mad bee. Okay, so there is a sequence of alphabets, and you fill the sequence of this asterisk given one more alphabet, a 4-letter code. Now this is a three-letter code. You doesn't make much sense of it. It doesn't make sense that in terms of understanding the English this sentence. But if you make one more random arrangement into one more alphabet here, this becomes 4-letter word. In this 4-letter word, you try to deduce what is the code, what is the information this sentence, a random words are giving. You adding the 4th code, you look here. You look that bugs bite pear. So it means saying that a fruit of pear is bitten by bugs. So you add the random one. You had a message, bugs bite pear message 1. The outer message, you put Y, you put a kind of one more E, then they made beer. So they made beer is one more make sentence out of this. So these two information is explicit in terms of saying that it's not secret. It's not useful. If I am giving you a secret code, sending as working as spies, I can give you this kind of code, but I'm really worried about the 3rd message in the center. I want to make sure that that message is hidden and only you can understand by knowing the code, how to break the code. The outer green words, bugs bite pear, they made beer, I don't care. It's not the message I want to hide. So everyone can understand that. But if I want to hit the message here, if I put the right code here, I'm putting all D's only. See that? I'm adding repetitive alphabet, D here. She dated stirred. So they are saying that there is some kind of conspiracy going on. There is a secret message that should not be given to and work with spies only. So this she dated stud message should be hidden. So how do you hid it? You hid it by a kind of alpha secret code letters you are giving here. She dated stud. It goes into a hidden transcript, hidden formation, hidden loop, and this you can read, but this you cannot read. It's nothing but it's a similar analogous of a secret messages in this code is nothing different from the secret message that's hidden in the euchromatin of the genome organization or complex genome organization in terms of U and heterochromatin. Heterochromatin is the message, I don't care, but the euchromatin is the message where my genes are hidden, where if I want to make a specific cell type expression, make a specific protein, that genome of portion should be available for transcription. But if no transcription is happening, I don't want to expose the gene coding information that it may get disrupted, it may get be activated randomly. So the genome organizes in terms of this, doing this not, and this kind of DDD repeated elements is nothing but a GC pairs that may be present within a histone association. This you're not looking for 1D here, you're looking for multiple loops here. This triangle loop becomes smaller again, smaller again, smaller again, smaller again, and that's why the histones organize here in the hidden codes. So that's a beautifully explained here how the U and heterochromatin formation, how a complex genome is organized. You can read the text here, whatever I'm saying. The increased GC content is really helping in this organization of the histones that also different from eukaryotes to prokaryotes. Okay, coming on to genomic sequences in terms of the repetitive DNA, coming on to curricular portion of the class, you might be having a lot of 2-mark questions, 4-mark questions. An important concept here, microsatellites, what are repetitive sequences, what are ALU elements, what are retrotransposons. So basically the further class will be in terms of descriptive manner. I might be reading some important text here to make some sense out of it, but please make notes of it, this presentation. It's really important, you might get some 10 marks out of it. So classification of the genomic sequences, given a genome, haploid set of the sequences in terms of C value, the genome can be divided into coding region of the genome that is sometimes called exome. And in the given the human case, it is only 1.5 to 2%. All the 98% is non-coding DNA sequences. Of the non-coding DNA sequences, they are all not common, not only a single stretch of sequences. There are highly diverse elements are here. They are called, one of them is simply terms you can remember, introns and pseudogenes, repeated sequences, non-coding RNA or ncRNA. Coming on to other sequences that regulate transcription, they are also non-coding sequences that we discussed in the last class, cis elements and trans elements. Cis elements are part of the promoter, 5' UTR, 3' UTRs. Trans elements are enhancers, silencer, and insulators. Some portion of CPG islands coming onto this sequence of regulating transcription, and introns, intergenic regions. Pseudogenes, we will see what are those. And repetitive sequences in terms of you are getting a stretches of DNA that is highly repeated. You see that 50% of the DNA is repeated. Of this repeated sequence, what are the types you can see? You can see 2 types of repeated sequences. One is called mobile genetic elements that are called transposons. Another one is called satellite DNA. They are tandem repeats. We will see what are these tandem repeats. We will see further what are these transposons. Some of the repetitive sequences are called mobile genetic elements because given the genome, they can be chopped off. They can be chopped from location, hop and chop. They can go and hop into other portion of the genome. They can go into genetic rearrangements. They have a specific mechanism of transposase enzyme that chops, and then a transposon mechanism that we will see further. Coming on to satellite DNA, they are nothing but tandem repeats present at the center of the chromosome, present at the end of the chromosome, and some other regions are called microsatellites. Centromeres, telomeres, it's part of the satellite DNA of the chromosomal location. We will see in the next class on physical and genetic maps, and then mobile genetic elements, we will see into that. So again, coming on in terms of the percentages, not looking into deeper, you go into this chart, you look into this, of this 98%, what that constitutes, repetitive 50, single copy is 49. That means it is not repeated. And of the repeated sequence, interspersed and tandem, interspersed are lines, signs, long tandem repeats, retrosomes, and DNA transposons. Tandem are micro, mini, and the satellite regions. So you go in terms of the percentage, you can make notes of that. Again, one more diagram that can talk about only repetitive. It's not 2030, it's 40, it may be a old data. So let's take some of these class of main classes of repetitive DNA. What are those in terms of types we looked at? Interspersed repeats, they are nothing but DNA or RNA transposon derived. They constitute approximately 45% of the human genome. They are lines, signs, and ALU segments. These processed pseudogenes, basically they are saying that they are genes, but they are pseudogenes in terms. They don't make functional product of the protein. We will see what are those. Microsatellites, segmental duplications, a block about 1 kilobase to 300 kilobases. See that it's not from 1 kilobase, 1 kbs to it is about 300 kilobases that may be copied intra or interchromosomally. That may be an exchange between chromosomes, an exchange within a chromosome that can happen, segmental duplications. Then blocks of tandem repeats that include telomere and centromere repeats. They may be again span of million base pairs. We will see into that. Go into that transposon elements. This is nothing but jumping elements, mobile genetic elements. Of the transposons, most of them we call one more term called retrotransposons. They constitute 40% of the human genome. They are variable in terms of the family members also, in terms of evolution. They really some elements called L1, ALU, and SV4A transposon, retrotransposons. They are basically not that I discussed in a previous class. They are elements of the DNA and RNA viruses. Viruses between bacteria and between viruses, there is a lot of horizontal gene transfer. The elements can mobilize within genome. The same way during evolution, some of these retrotransposon DNA elements have been incorporated into human genome through a process of transpositional insertions. A lot of genetic polymorphism like SNPs, one more important. And retrotransposons also used as a marker for population genetics, looking at the densities. Look into that. You go into a specific database if you are more interested. A database retrotransposons and polymorphism you can search into that. Coming on to next class of called pseudogenes. These genes have a stop codon, frame shift mutation, or loss of promoter activity, and basically they do not encode for a functional protein based on having a missense mutation, a frame shift mutation, or loss of promoter activity. They commonly arise from retrotransposition again, following by gene duplication and subsequent gene loss. It's a process of evolutionary term gene duplication, gene loss. You go into pseudogene.org, you can find more details about this, that. And again, in terms of repetitive DNA, simple sequence repeats, they are called microsatellites, mini satellites. Microsatellites, nothing but from 1 to a dozen base pairs that are repeated. Either A's are repeated at one time or dozen times. CAs are repeated 1 to 12. CGG is repeated 1 to 12. They are coming from a process by replication slippage. You don't need to know for the class. You go into mini satellites. There are mini satellites, a dozen to 500 base pairs are repeated. Mini and micro. Micro is small, mini is there, and again mini to satellite. That is more higher in terms of. These are simple sequences. You look into that. Of these satellite sequences, two terms are really important. 2 mark questions. The first one is called line and sign. Line is called long interspersed nuclear element. They encode a reverse transcriptase enzyme and some other proteins they encode. In mammalian genomes, line family is called line 2 and line 1 based on the evolution. Look into more detail. And in terms of the sign, short interspersed nuclear element, they also mainly coming from evolving from the line elements. These are in primates, ALU elements. Some of the mice will have B1 and B2 as part of the sign family. Usually they are in one copy or multiple copies. And ALU sequences are highly accumulated in GC regions. L1 sequences are GC poor region based on the complexity and the association studies. This may be important for 2 mark questions. You make notes of it. And if given a software tools, how do you compare 2 different genomes? How do you look in terms of the genome for coding and non-coding region? How you can go into that? This is again UCCF genomic browser that we discussed in the last class. You compare, I'm giving one genome here, another genome here per se. I'm comparing two genomes here. I'm looking for different coding and non-coding regions. For example, a conserved coding region may exist in this region, and there is a sign element. You see a stretch of the DNA that's present here, and the kind of line element, short, long, and short. You can see different based on the length. I can see a line element conserved between two genomes. I can see specific genes also conserved between that. Coming on to the spectrum of variation in terms of a category of the variation or repetitive element, and kind of category and kind of size. What is the size in terms of repetition? What is the type of the repetition molecule of the output you are looking for? For example, if you look in from going from this chart direction to this chart, this direction, you're looking at SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphism. You're looking at point mutation. You are looking at microsatellites. You are looking at duplications, deletions, or inversions, tandem repeats, signs and lines, long tandem repeats. And you go in terms of a few other euploidy or aneuploidy, that you look into the size. SNPs 1 base pair, microsatellites 1 to 50, 1 to 500, deletion or insertion 50 base pairs to 5 kb, and tandem repeats long and short. You can go up to 5 million base pairs also. You can go into putting into the genomes. These are called retro element insertions, short tandem repeats, single base pair chains. This also makes you sense in terms of the size of the repeats or size of the repetitive element, type of the repeated elements, category in terms of the variation. So in simple mnemonic, you don't want to go and you don't want to forget about that. You look in terms of that a bee stings and the sting bites. Mnemonic, take a sting of a bee. Sting is nothing but you take this sting and look for these non-coding regions. Mnemonic, sting, S-T-I-N-G, sting. You take that non-coding DNA. If you don't want to write everything about it, but at least you write about the sting, nothing but satellite DNA, telomeres, introns, non-coding RNA, gene regulatory sequence. You will read it a little bit more. We explain further into that. Okay, coming in a few minutes, we will try to conclude the class today. So coming on to this highly repetitive sequence duplications and insertions, and we already spoken in previous classes a lot about genome sequencing, genome assembly, and we were speaking about there are a lot of gaps sometimes in the genome assembly. You cannot probably sequence the portion. What are the gaps we spoke about is nothing but constraints arised from in the genome of highly repetitive sequences, because the genome assembly identifies some sequence of ATGCs, deletions or duplication or retrotransposons. It may find difficult to assign it chromosome 1 or chromosome 10 because it finds a similarity 100% to that, to this. Then how do you align that? How do you align this portion of the DNA sequence repeated to that? That's why there are a lot of consideration in genome sequencing. It's not an easy job. Even a satellite DNA is very difficult to sequence, the chromosomal location, satellite DNA, as there are few markers to help them clone and subclones. There are centromere, telomere association you can do. That's why many of the satellite DNA are tough to sequence. They're left unsequenced unless you kind of serendipitously assemble from the DNA assembly, you may find a match. And the middle repetitive DNA sequences in the genome also are highly tough because they are somewhere middle of upper and lower repeated sequences. And how do you say that it's coming in the middle portion first or the end of the portion? It is assembling is very tough. Much of the DNA is packed into heterochromatin. That also makes some sense into that. However, in higher organism, protein coding genes are again in the euchromatin. They are in the heterochromatin. So highly repeated, that is making a mask. Again, go inside euchromatin. Highly repeated again, making a mask, and it is protecting the protein coding genes. It's sometimes tough to assemble. It's not an easy job to work on genome complexity. So coming on to conclusion of the class, where we started, simple prokaryotes to eukaryotes in terms of evolutionary trends. We don't want to talk in terms of the haploid set of total haploid set of the genome, that's C value. We don't need to talk in terms of complexity of the organism, not only to protein coding genes. We need to talk in terms of non-coding genes, non-coding DNA, and the DNA value here given the prokaryotes to eukaryotes. vertebrates, non-coding is evolving highly. That makes sense for the complexity of the organism. And simple terms, how the trend have been changed in the evolution in terms of complexity, unicellular, simple bacteria and single cells. Given a trend, multicellular organism arises. When they arise, there is structural changes. In sponges, you can see expansion of introns, spliceosome complexes, very relaxation of intronic RNA sequences. There is a trend from simple to complex in terms of the genomic organization. You move little bit upper, you go into plants and algae. High organism of histone genes are coming, histone complexes are coming, chromatin is coming, and in terms of the animal, evolution of plasticity is coming up into this. So that concludes the class in terms of the elements, non-coding elements, what they constitute. Again, I'm reiterating, please make notes of it. It's highly descriptive chapter. I might have to pass the message to you only, but as a simple ATGC language. But what do you decode from it? What do you make sense out of it in the exam? You have to work on your own. Okay, I will stop the recording. In 5 minutes, we can discuss briefly, and then we will end the meeting for today.